let's jump in and take a look at one of the coolest areas across security, and that's social engineering. Social engineering is all about hacking people. It's about being deceptive, making them feel warm and fuzzy, and hopefully getting them to do something, right? Giving us some information, could be some sort of context information based on how they do their jobs or some details about technology, right? Could be a technological component, could be information about the wireless credentials and the passwords to getting access to cubicles and locked doors and facilities and that side of things. So social engineering is ideally the idea behind tricking people to give you information, right? So tricking people. That's the art around the human exploitation, right? There's a whole psychological component to social engineering. And in this video, we're going to cover a couple of the conceptual ideas around social engineering. We'll look at the social engineering process and a couple of other videos around some practicality around social engineering. So we'll jump into Kali Linux, we'll use social engineering toolkit, and then we'll develop and deploy some cloning of websites and other sort of areas of practical social engineering techniques. So the rest of this, we'll just cover some details and define parameters around what social engineering is. We'll take a look at the process itself and we'll assign some case studies around this as well. So the idea is behind social engineering is everything about tricking people, right? Giving you information, getting them to do something, taking an action. And it's all kind of falls down into a couple of things, right? It's manipulation and being deceitful. That's right, DEC for short, right? So being deceitful and causing that deception and essentially having that, I guess, the art of that human, exploitation of human nature, how people are wired, how people are going to respond to something, the good Samaritan who's loves to do something great because they want to be a good person, and taking advantage of that, which can sometimes, not be a good thing, right? And, you go through those processes very meticulously when you're doing that with customers. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell, right? Around, the human nature side of things and obviously getting people to do something in a certain situation or a certain scenario. So if social engineering is in scope during an engagement, well, then we want to gain information, obviously, trying to socially engineer people and take advantage of them. So that's social engineering. Let's take a look at the actual process. And if you're new to social engineering, this is kind of the process on how we begin, that path, right? And the very first thing that we need to do is identifying the target. We need to find who is going to be in scope or who we have permission to assess and target. Could be, a specific person. I'm going to say people. Could be systems that we're going to socially engineer. If they're payroll systems, maybe HR functions, could be other softwares, right? And the list goes on, right? It could be a function or a feature, and then someone that administers that we're going to maybe socially engineer, right? A person, and then we're going to go away and do that. So the first part is obviously defining who our target is. So identifying that target and making sure, I cannot stress this enough, is making sure that that target is going to be in scope. So we've got a defined rules of engagement that we've spoken in a previous video around what are we going to do with that person if we do engage, how we're going to do that, what are the permissions all associated with that, and making sure it's all signed off and authorized before we go away and do anything that's further damaging, right? So identifying the target, we've got to go away and define who we're going to target. Then we go into our scenario building. So step two is scenario. And I'll just write scenario because this is where we're going to go away and come up with the scenario, right? We can talk to them about something, maybe try establish a rapport or a sense of authority. Center works really well. So I'm going to say authority because people are going to respond to authority. If you seem that you've come from an authoritative background, people are going to be susceptible to that and they're going to react and respond into that nature, right? It's just the way humans are. And then there's rapport, right? So we want to create some sort of rapport, some sort of establishment with that person. And then that way we come across as a trusted person and we're labeled as trustworthy. So the ultimate piece for this step two is trustworthy, right? We want to be trusted and we want to have that validity that if we go away and do something, then they are going to associate us with trust. And that's part of that process, which brings us into our relationship. Now, I'm not talking about having a meaningful relationship or anything like this. When I'm talking about relationship, this is us um, building out and establishing a relationship come of a pretty much a common form, um, whether it's a discussion across an establishment setting. So if we typically, for me, I like to cycle. So am I going to now strike up a conversation with someone that's a cyclist, or have a specific vendor of bicycles that this person, I can't draw, but that's a bike. Maybe it's an S Works, right? And I love my specialized. Maybe it's a Bianchi, and then am I going to make sure that the person that I'm going to be targeting maybe does right, or maybe they take a specific route to work. Maybe that there's end of trip facilities, or I'm going to strike up a conversation and they're going to see me regularly, and then they're going to put an association that I work with a specific company, and that we're now buddies in the morning, or we're coming in at the same time at 8 o'clock. We tag on end of trip facilities, take our bikes. How you doing? How was your ride in? Great. And now we're establishing a relationship with that person, right? So it's about building that trust, about building that relationship, and hopefully, end of the as we get to the bottom part here, around the exploitation phase, we want to exploit that relationship. So step three is all about building that relationship out and having a common face, either yourself or that person that's going to be actively engaged in that scenario. They can take that away from our rapport and our authority, where we're trustworthy, right? And then we go into a relationship phase. So this is where we're building out the relationship with that person, and then that moves into our motivation. So as we tag on the second part here, is motivation. And motivation is all about motivating them to help, right? What can we create, or what could be done? And this could be done through many forms and flavors of motivation, right? But it's essentially what we're going to be doing is all about getting them to take some sort of action to either help us accomplish our goals, right? It's the motivation behind it. Is it motivating to that person, right? So what is that motivating factor? And we don't know right now, because it could be many things. It could be, maybe it's you know uh, could be a bunch of things, right? It could be that good Samaritan phase. It could be, it's the end of the day. I just want to get my job done. And there's a factor there to get something completed within a short period of time. So creating that urgency, that resonancy, that they see you, they understand you, but now it's urgent. Okay, now I understand what that is. So it's finding out what that motivation is, to then getting them to react on it. And then the final part is the exploit. Now, the exploit is all about taking advantage of that relationship, right? Now, that's the last and final component, right? We've now gotten to that point where we can leverage that exploitation, whether it's the physical access, whether it's getting them to give us information. Maybe this whole process could be, I want to socially engineer someone that's, I know that's maybe, I'm going to put an example here as we sort of go through a couple of other examples. Maybe the CEO of a company that we've been engaged to see if he or she would divulge any information about the company. Maybe the company has a very specific intellectual property. Maybe I've done some research that I know that this CEO is a very big car enthusiast, and he that's a car, whatever that is, and I know that he regularly goes to a lot of car conferences. So car conferences, he goes to a lot of car meetups. Um, there's other sort of, not exotic but supercar events that he goes to and hosts. So then I can maybe go away and maybe go hire a supercar for the day, or hire a performance car and show up to one of these conferences, and start building out that scenario, start building out that relationship. So he sees me and he starts associating me as part of a conference, or part of a member, part of these associates. That way, if I can then strike up a conversation that he's in a particular business and I own a particular business, will he divulge or give us information around maybe that intellectual property, or other sensitive, like other sensitive factors around something that we're trying to get out of, basically our goal or our mission statement based on this engagement. So that's what it's all about. It's always about the human aspect of things. So let's do some case studies and some examples of this, and we'll walk through the identification phase all the way to the exploit phase. So I'm just going to clear the screen out a little bit as I do this. And what we can then do, what we can then do is we can just reference each part of these as we sort of discuss the examples, and we can reference them to each component of um, this triangle life cycle, right? So let's go through the first one. So let's just say that we're maybe being brought on through a financial services company here in Australia, and we're getting brought on as a consultant to perform. I'm just going to put here consultant and we are going to do an external pen test. So we've got a list of assets that we're going to pen test, the whole external perimeter. So I'm just going to put external perimeter here, and phishing and social engineering is all going to be in scope part of the engagement. Customer is a financial services customer, so I'm going to put dollars here because they're in the financial services. So that's all we know at this stage. And we've got some domain names and stuff like that for external pen tests that we're going to go away and do, and that's all great. So now social engineering and social engineering and phishing will also be part of the engagement. So the customer said, yes, we want to go away and do that. And we're going to now go obviously do identification of that target, right? So once we identified our target, we got to go now and define who's going to be in scope for this. So we can use things like, AMAS, start looking at, subdomains, and then confirming all this within our ROE, firstly, of how we're going to go away and do it. So our methodology, obviously our milestones and outcomes, what are they going to entail? So I'm going to put outcomes, right? Our communication is going to be very, very important, how we're going to communicate to our stakeholders and people in the engagement. And then obviously things as well with our phishing. So if we've got phishing in scope, how we're going to go away to develop our campaign. So you may go away and develop a campaign that's got a couple of things. We've got to go away and confirm things with the customer. So confirmations, and I'm talking about confirmations in terms of domain names, IPs, you know, users that are going to be in scope for this engagement. Maybe they're going to give you a list. Maybe you're going to go away and do your own investigation of lists. And there's a list of things that we have to go away and do, right? We have to go test if that's going to be in scope. Are they going to whitelist, or are you going to be testing against the technologies? Right? Is that part of the whole engagement where they're not going to whitelist you and then you have to go around their secure email gateway? Maybe they're using a specific vendor, and part of that engagement is to try and go around that vendor and get access to maybe do business email compromise, which we'll talk about in another video. That's part of the engagement, right? So there's a different, there's a detailed definition around how engaged we're going to be with this engagement. But part of that process now is to identify. So we've got to go away and identify the target, right? Maybe we have to define the application that we're going to attack, or maybe the person that we're going to go after, right? So I'm going to put here, maybe it's subdomain, and I've just got a call coming through, and I apologize for that. I'm just going to pause the screen and I'll return in just a moment. So let's continue. Sorry about that. Now, after we look at the first phase from obviously defining the application, obviously using tools like AMAS, sublister, looking at domain names, and we're going to have to identify that application that we're going to use, or that's going to be part of the engagement itself, right? So we could also look at job postings, right? If the company is uploading or updating specific job function requirements, maybe it's a specific flavor of vendors or a specific version that they use or support. These are all things that we can take within our arsenal to engage and define our phishing parameters and our social engineering, right? So stating again that experience relating to that application or the system infrastructure, these are good insights that we can then take away. And then step three, I'm going to put step one here, is to um, define the application, because usually it's an application of state that we have to define that's going to be in scope for the actual delivery of the engagement. And then we're going to look at the social presence of that, right? So social presence, because then that information will then tell us what they're actually supporting and how we're going to go away and do that. And then step three is where we initiate, right? That's going to be our you know, our core, like if we're going to call the reception desk or maybe the admin team, maybe we can pose as market analysts, or we're doing market research, and we're maybe with a specific vendor. We can look at the Australian Financial Review if we're going to do an audit, or we're going to feature you guys in a new post that we're doing, and we'd love to know more about the product that you're using, and then obviously go from there, right? So we can pose as something, and then obviously that left hook, which they're going to give us information around that system that we need, right? So maybe it is what system they're using, right? Or if we know what that is, maybe there's versions. or maybe it's obviously something to do with the username schema on how they go away and actually, log into that platform. Are there any requirements to do that? Do you need a, do you need a job ID? Do you need a email address? Or there's all these things we need to know, right? Now, once we have that information and the details, now it's time to move on into the relationship phase of that building, right? So we've gone through these two steps. So we've identified the target, we looked at its scenario build of how we're going to do that. And then finally, we're going to tap into obviously calling or engaging with someone specifically to go away and call the target. Maybe it's a time sensitive timing, maybe they operate, or maybe they use this application between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. Or maybe they do it at the end of the month at 12 p.m. if they have to conduct their payroll schemas and stuff like that. Or maybe it's a certain time period, maybe it's 4 p.m. And then we can then engage, maybe if it's a late afternoon or before lunch typically works well. Then we will call and obviously use platforms then like, there's things like spoof card that we can go away and then basically spoof our calls. We can go away and do that and appear that we're either coming in within the same organization or we're coming in with the same geolocation, or if that specific vendor is located in another region of the world, we can use these tools like spoof card, and then we can mask or essentially spoof, right, our calls. And that's one of the ways we can do that, right? So if we want to introduce ourselves, hey, thank you for helping us either late in the day or, early morning or whatever the scenario is. And, just so we don't get left behind in our schedule, we create a bit of urgency and a bit of, time sensitivity to this, right? Depending on who we're engaging with, depending on what we're going to be doing, we create that urgency, or we create pretty much the dependency for them to either give us the information just to get out of their hair. Maybe they're busy with things. We have to create that, and that's obviously going and doing that through the relationship build phase, right? And then from there, what we want to do is we want to mention something that's either interesting to them. So when we've got that relationship through that, the relationship phase and the scenario building that we've gone through already, we wanted to find something that's easily digestible for the conversation to happen, right? Either maybe we've seen something with them, or maybe in this case of, the traveling CEO with the cars, this could be something that I could pose and discuss and say, hey, we noticed that XYZ drives the same vehicle, or maybe I've seen you at a couple of events, ha ha ha. You're building that sort of that rapport, but based on that trustworthiness, right? Which then gives us the next leg up into as we move into the exploitation and the motivational phase, right? So again, once we've sort of gone through that, we can then say, hey, you know what, we're also going to be connecting into your computer. We're going to record some information for the upcoming upgrade, if it's a planned upgrade or whatever it's going to be, or if it's a scheduled upgrade or a scheduled release in a few weeks' time. And then we have them obviously connect into a remote session or remote software, right, that we're going to use to then, either IDP in, connect in, maybe we'll poke around and look at some stuff, right? So that's one of those parts. That way we've got to make sure that we've got the same name that we're rebranding with, and we're going to use that same application vendor. And then we're going to ask the target then to open up the app, and then we're going to then record the version. We're going to record some items, pretend we're looking around as we are, right? And these parts of the exploit, you want to maybe take no more than probably 1 to 2 minutes. Once we're going to get that sort of, we've maybe connected in somehow, maybe we've got that version, or we now know how they, take a few screenshots of the actual application itself, maybe the surrounding environment on how they do that. And you want to keep that as short as possible, because once it starts exceeding times, then it starts to become a bit more questionable. So you want to get in there, get your job done, and get out. So that's kind of a bit in a nutshell when we talk about the methodology phrase, the process itself, identifying the target, all the way to the exploit phase where we're actually going away and doing that, or doing the component that we came to initially do. In upcoming videos, we're going to look at some other attacks and different tools as well. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and as always, I'll see you all in the next video. Bye for now.